The war between Russia and Ukraine escalated into 2023. While Ukraine is smashing the invading Russian troops on the eastern and southern fronts, the Russian army continues its missile terror against these humiliations. In the last days of 2022, Russia continues its missile attacks without slowing down in its military operation against Ukraine. Unfortunately, the excitement of the upcoming new year is not felt on the streets and avenues of Ukraine. There are bitter feelings in Ukraine, especially in Kiev. Despite all his failures, the Russian leader is not willing to give up. Vladimir Putin is applying the same strategy as the war enters its 11th month. Putin is once again taking action to attack civilian infrastructure on Ukrainian cities. The second major missile strike in 3 days, New Year's Eve attacks, damaged civilian infrastructure and homes the other day, with drone and artillery strikes also occurring in towns from north to south. While Ukraine is still fighting for its freedom as we enter 2023, Russian President Vladimir Putin has launched a new round of mass missile strikes targeting residential areas rather than infrastructure. War criminal Putin celebrates New Year by killing people. Meanwhile, Ukrainian cities including Kiev, Lviv, and Odessa on Thursday were heavily hit by Russian missiles as Putin's army struck infrastructure, affecting those cities' power grids. Russia has repeatedly targeted Ukraine's power grid, which has caused widespread power outages as winter approaches. There would certainly be an answer from the Ukrainian army to this inhuman attitude of the Russian leader. The reprisals between the two countries continue these days, as they always do. During Russia's massive missile attack on Ukraine on December 30th, the Ukrainian Air Force destroyed 58 out of 70 cruise missiles. In addition, 3 reconnaissance UAVs and 1 Mi-8 helicopter were shot down by the air defense forces of the Ukrainian Air Force in the east. The previous day, the Ukrainian Air Defense Forces managed to shoot down 56 of 70 Russian missiles. On January 1st, the Kiev City Military Administration gave general information about the night attack of Russian aggressors on the Ukrainian capital. 32 air targets were detected in the Kiev area and all 32 were destroyed. There is no information about the loss of life. On the night of December 31st, 2022, January 1st, 2023, Russian invaders attacked Ukraine with Iranian-made Shahed 131, 136 kamikaze drones. Due to the combat work of the air defense, 45 assault UAVs were destroyed. Strengthened cooperation with the air defense of other elements of the defense forces of Ukraine, 13 in 2022 and 32 in 2023. With the successful operations of the Ukrainian Air Force, Russia is taking another heavy blow. The Kremlin, which was worn out especially by the prolongation of the war and the futile attacks, is drifting towards a dead end with these latest attacks. For the third time in a row, the Ukrainian Air Force has managed to defeat the Russian missile terror with a legendary success. On the last day of 2022, approximately 89% of the Russian cruise missiles and UAVs launched over the Ukrainian skies were shot down successfully. Ukraine shot down 185 missiles and 165 of the UAVs and aircraft launched by the Russians over 3 days in total. And the key to this success was the American NASAMS, the British Starstreak, the German Jeopard and Iris-T, and the French Crotale. These systems turned Putin's plans upside down with 100% accuracy. Let us now turn our attention to developments on the front line. Russian soldiers are trying to improve their tactical position on the front lines in the direction of Kupiansk and Liman. Bakhmut and Avdiivka direction are among the places where the most active combat operations are currently underway. In these regions, Russian military units are consolidating their presence by trying to improve their tactical position. National Guard units, which work jointly with the Russian armed forces in this region, maintain their positions. One of the goals of the Russian Federation is to advance, in particular, to the administrative borders of the Donetsk region. And there they use all possible shock attack moves using various tactics. We also learned that the Russian invaders began to build a fortification line in the village of Rozivka in the Zaporizhia region, on the administrative border with the Donetsk region. As for Bakhmut, the losses are quite large, but the Russian forces see no success. As reported, President Vladimir Zelensky said that only a few civilians remained in Bakhmut, that there was no place in the area that was not covered in blood, and that an hour had not passed without the roar of artillery shelling. It is possible to say that the Russian army still maintains its presence in the eastern regions of Ukraine. Likewise, Moscow soldiers are trying to hold on to the southern parts of Ukraine. We realize that Putin and his army are far from ending the war. Russian forces continue to transfer military equipment and manpower to Berdyansk, which was captured in the south of Ukraine. Intense military action against Berdyansk continues. On average, up to 10 tracked vehicles are transported to the Berdyansk direction every day. In addition, the intense movement of the trucks carrying the soldiers does not go unnoticed until now. Russian invaders are gradually turning the temporarily occupied Mariupol into a military base. However, while the attacks carried out by Ukraine, both on its own territory and allegedly within Russia, completely changed the course of the war, Moscow's preparations for a major attack in the first months of 2023 occupy the agenda. But it looks like the record casualties of Putin's army will not allow for this planned offensive. In addition, if the current offensive and defensive performance of the Ukrainian armed forces continues after the new year, the Moscow army will most likely not even be able to get out of the defensive position on the battlefield. American analysts draw attention to the words of Kirilo Budanov, head of the main intelligence department of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, on December 31st, who stated that the Russian forces in Ukraine are experiencing significant problems with artillery ammunition, which will become more evident by March 2023. Notably, Russian forces could previously use 60,000 cannonballs per day and now can only use 19,000 to 20,000 shells. Russian forces also removed all remaining artillery munitions from Belarusian military depots to support their operations in Ukraine. He also recalled the UK Department of Defense's announcement on the 24th of December that Russian forces currently do not have the necessary stockpile of artillery to support large-scale offensive operations, and require substantial expenditure from the Russian military to maintain defensive operations along the front line in Ukraine. Ammunition restrictions will likely partially prevent Russian forces from continuing high-speed operations in the Bakhmut area in the near term. The depletion of the Russian army's artillery stockpiles will likely affect their ability to conduct high-speed operations elsewhere in Ukraine. Ukraine has this report that the Russians have already depleted their stockpiles of ammunition in Belarus. Therefore, a large-scale Russian attack from Belarus in the coming months is unlikely. Vladimir Putin's cruelty is enough to suppress even the enthusiasm of the new year. However, there is a detail that the Russian leader did not pay attention to. Vladimir Putin trashes 2 decades of success with the Ukraine war. Putin hoped for a swift victory over his Eastern European neighbor, but Kiev responded with a stronger-than-expected defensive effort, further backed by Western humanitarian and military assistance. Despite its broad ranks, the Russian military has struggled to achieve key targets in Ukraine, whose troops recaptured thousands of square miles of previously occupied territory throughout the autumn. Now, although many Russians continue to support the war, Putin is reportedly facing internal pressure to turn the tide of the war amid rising casualties. The success that Putin saw during his tenure, including the strengthening of the Moscow economy and his previous military successes, now faces the threat of being tainted by a potential failure in Ukraine. As casualties rise in the ongoing war, some experts say Ukraine could even retake Crimea and essentially undo one of Putin's key achievements. The war also damaged Moscow's economy, which was hit hard by Western sanctions. During the war, Putin's popularity fell among the Russians. Putin's army has faced several casualties in recent months, lost territory, and became demoralized despite authorities' efforts to increase the number of troops fighting in Ukraine. Let's wait and see how the course of the war will change in the new year. Thank you for watching us.